Welcome to part 2 of how to use the Blitz Warzone Statistics System, or BWSS. If you haven't watched part 1, this may seem a little more confusing, or it may not, who knows. The purpose of this video is to do two things. One is to tell you how I get my numbers and how you can get similar numbers. And the second part is why I listed some of the stats and why they were important and why I didn't list some stats. Like I said in the first video, it doesn't really matter where you get your information from as long as they're accurate. So basically, test this on your own or get it from YouTubers or websites. It doesn't really matter as long as you get the numbers and they're good. It's good to often cross-check the numbers with others just to make sure that they're good, because sometimes things get buffed or nerfed and they change. Sometimes the numbers are a few months old, and because it's such an underused item, or maybe nobody really felt it, nobody bothered to check it again, even though they're different now. One of the biggest questions one may have after looking at my guide is what the hell is a T rating and how it relates to stability. It's pretty simple. T equals target line. This specific target right here, each line every time you cross one, that's a 0.5 T rating. To my knowledge, this specific target is the only one that has lines or target sizes this small. So when you put a head right in front of it, a head hitbox is equivalent to 2.5 T. I use 2.5 T at 20 meters as the midpoint of the range because I believe that a more accurate build should be able to constantly get headshots at a much further distance. Like I said before, with distance, any sway or anything is multiplied. So that is why I chose 2.5 as the midpoint and not the best. To test your T rating, simply place the target on a wall and run 20 meters away. Then place your crosshair in the center of it, and then ADS without moving your mouse or thumbstick. Your reticle will most likely start moving, so mark where it first moves to and then where it ends up after a cycle. It'll probably repeat this, so it'll be kind of easy to tell how big it is. And if you can see here, this M4, it started a little bit up to the left, and then it ended up a little bit bottom to the right. It crossed 4 lines total, so 4 times 0.5 equals 2T. While it's not too important that your reticle is centered on the target before you start the test, it does make it a little easier to tell exactly how many lines you're crossing. I had a very difficult time giving value to the ADS and sprint out time sections of this guide. I thought they were more important than they were, since in Warzone you're doing a lot of sprinting, and if you see someone first and you're sprinting, you better sprint out faster than they can. And the same goes with ADS. It doesn't matter if you have a 200 millisecond time to kill when your ADS is 400 milliseconds. By the time you ADS, you could probably already be dead. This is especially the case when someone is camping in a corner with their sights already aimed down and you're running. So as much as I love ADS, I had to push it down because that person who's camping in a corner, they're not benefiting from ADS time. So I had to make it a little bit less than it was. This guide in the end is supposed to help everyone and make sure that you know what your gun is doing and your build is good for what you want it to do. The ADS and sprint out times though are still needed, even though you may not use them, because at some point you're gonna have to run from the zone. And if you're very aggressive, then these two stats may be some of the most important, because it doesn't matter if the person can kill you 50 milliseconds faster if you can aim down sights 200 milliseconds even faster than them. So in the end, it depends. Not the answer anyone wants to hear, but that is what it is. So where is hipfire included? And the answer is the recoil chart. I was originally going to have a mobility slot for hipfire, but then I realized if you're hipfiring, you probably have a specialized build, a shotgun, a pistol, or an SMG that does that. So you're probably going to be stacking with attachments to improve your hipfire, not much your normal recoil. What I'm trying to say is that you typically build for hipfire, and the hipfire statistic is not very important on a long-range AR. Most likely you're also running an SMG or a shotgun to complement it, so there was no point in adding an extra statistic that would kind of just bring down the value of the gun in the end. You may have noticed that bullet velocity was basically twice on the chart, and that's because one of them is for damage, making sure that your bullet can hit the target fast enough. And the second one is for mobility, which lets you know how much you have to lead your target. If it's under 100 milliseconds, you actually don't have to lead your target. You can pretty much aim on the target and it will hit. To use this chart, all you gotta do is go down on the left side until you find the bullet velocity of your gun, so let's say 950 meters per second. And then we go all the way to the right until we see the yellow, and that is up to 90 meters, you can aim on the target. And you can see anything above 90 meters, it's all red, so that means you'll have to start leading. If you need a little help judging your recoil, here's a little chart that I made that may help you a little more. So on the left, we've got the Kilo, Fin, and M13. They have the best recoil out of all the guns, so those get a perfect 50. The AMAX gets a 40 because its recoil is pretty easy to control, but because it moves left and then right and then left again, you do have to make up for that pattern. While the AUG 556 seems like it would be very easy to control, you do have to remember that this is based on mouse movement or controller stick movement, so you do have to move quite a lot in order to make up for all that recoil. And this is why it gets a 30. The MP5 gets a 20, and it originally was going to have a much lower rating, but it turns out if you fire it in bursts of like 20, it's actually reasonably well controllable. It's not great for long range, but since this build was actually built to run hipfire, this is actually pretty okay. The lowest score on this chart is the AS Val with a 13. Its first few shots are extremely erratic, and because it only has a 30 round mag, it makes up a large portion of its whole recoil plot. While not listed, the Rytec AMR gets a score of 5, and this is because it requires the same movement as the AUG 556, but only for 5 bullets instead of 54. Remember though that all of these charts are guns with attachments, not without them. Continuing with recoil, we need to talk about FOV and Zoom. We'll get there when we get there, trust me. I know this topic has been covered a lot, the differences between FOV, so I'm going to try to move through this as quickly as I can. So from the 6 pictures you can see that things look a little bit zoomed in differently depending on their FOV. You can also see that on a lower FOV, the guns tend to zoom in a tiny bit more. Now here you can see that a zoomed in gun at 100 FOV matches the same zoom as an un-ADS gun at 80 FOV. In order to match the zoom from an 80 FOV, so default PC or console zoom, you basically have to use a holo sight. So if you play in a lower FOV, either because you're forced to or by choice, play this to your advantage. Use iron sights or lower zoom optics to get the same or better zoom than a lot of people on higher FOV without sacrificing valuable ADS time or an attachment slot. So this brings us back to the recoil, or more how the recoil feels. So if you're zoomed in more, you're gonna feel a lot more recoil, and you're gonna have to move your mouse or thumbstick a lot more to make up for it. At a higher FOV, this is slightly unfair because you have to move a little bit less, but you don't get the same zoom, so you'll have a harder time seeing your target. At a lower zoom, it's easier to be a few degrees off, and if you remember from my last video, you can see what kind of impact that can have. And this is why I do list the effect of recoil and zoom under the attachments, but they don't have a direct impact on the mobility stats. And this is how it should be, because we're looking at the build itself, and the only thing that matters is the distance between each point on the plot. Anything else that makes it easier on yourself is an outside multiplier, and this should not be included. Will I ever make separate guides for different classes? The answer is no. And this is because in the beginning, this is exactly what I did. And in the end, it ended up being kind of a tier list, and I didn't like this. I was being asked why they couldn't run an AX50 with an Origin 12 despite both being top tier in their classes. With my new unified system, these questions basically answer themselves. It'll make it easier for new players, or any player really, to ask a question and get an easy answer. This may not be the easiest system to get used to, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. Also, if you have that one squad mate who claims that their build is really good, you can plug in their numbers and really show them what it is. So, if you enjoyed this video or if it has helped you in any way, please hit like. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section down below. And if you want to make sure that you never miss out on another video, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Also, for the first 5 people that comment their builds on my Instagram post related to this video, I'll give you the choice of where you want your score, in a YouTube video form, a PDF, or a picture. Once again, thanks for watching.